Have you ever wondered what really happens when a narcissist realizes they can't control you anymore? It doesn't start with a big fight or a dramatic exit. It starts quietly, the moment you stop feeding their need for constant validation, when you stop reacting, when your silence replaces the tears they used to provoke, their carefully constructed power begins to crumble. They thrive on crossing your boundaries, testing how far they can push before you finally snap. But the first time you say no and mean it, the first time you enforce a boundary, they can't manipulate. Their ego takes a hit they never saw coming, and nothing shatters them more than seeing you heal, grow, and thrive without them. It's the one thing they can't stand. Proof that their absence doesn't destroy you. When they lose access to your empathy, when you no longer rescue them from the consequences of their actions, they're forced to face a reflection they've been avoiding their whole life. But the final blow? It comes when they realize you're no longer afraid to lose them. That's when their ego breaks and your freedom begins. You know what's fascinating about a narcissist? They believe they've got you figured out. From the moment they meet you, they start studying you, not out of care, but out of calculation. They test your limits, they measure your reactions, and slowly they craft this perfect little world where they're the center and you're orbiting around them. And for a while, it works. They know exactly what to say to pull you closer, what to withhold to make you chase, and what moments of affection to sprinkle in so you'll stay hooked. It's a cycle, an addictive push and pull that makes you question your worth and pour more of yourself into trying to please them. But here's the truth, no one tells you. The power they hold isn't real. It only exists because you're feeding it. Every time you over-explain yourself to avoid their silent treatment, every time you sacrifice your needs to keep the peace, every time you take responsibility for their bad behavior, you're handing them more of your energy, more of your attention, more of your power. And they drink it in like it's oxygen. The first moment their ego starts to crack is when you stop playing the role they've cast you in. When you wake up one morning and decide, I don't have to prove anything to this person anymore, something shifts. You don't even have to announce it or argue about it. You just go quiet. You detach emotionally. You stop reacting to the little provocations they throw at you to get a rise. And in that silence, in that calm detachment, the narcissist senses something terrifying. The control they thought was unshakable is slipping. At first, they won't believe it. They'll try the same tricks that used to work, criticizing you to make you defend yourself, giving you just enough affection to make you hope again, or even provoking jealousy to get an emotional reaction. And when none of it lands, when you respond with calm indifference instead of emotional chaos, they start to panic. Because now they're the one chasing validation. This is the moment they begin to feel something they've worked their whole lives to avoid: vulnerability. For the first time, they're confronted with the possibility that they aren't as magnetic, as irreplaceable, or as clever as they believed. That maybe, just maybe, the person they thought would always be there has found a way to live without them. You have to understand, this isn't about revenge or trying to break them down. This is about reclaiming yourself. A narcissist's ego thrives on keeping you small, unsure, and dependent. But the second you stop feeding them your energy, you start feeding yourself. And it's in that shift where their power crumbles. They might accuse you of being cold, selfish, or ungrateful. They'll say, you've changed. And they're right. You have. You've stopped showing up as the version of you they could manipulate, and started becoming the version of you that no longer needs their approval to feel whole. That's what breaks them. Not because you've hurt them, but because they realize they can't control someone who's no longer afraid of losing them. This isn't easy. There will be moments when you'll want to slip back into old patterns, to explain yourself, to make them see your heart, but don't. Because every time you choose your peace over their chaos, every time you choose silence over the exhausting need to be understood by someone who isn't willing to understand you, you're building something far stronger than any connection you ever had with them. You're building self-respect. And here's the beautiful irony. The moment you stop chasing them, they start chasing you. Not because they love you in the way you deserve, but because they're desperate to repair the fracture in their ego. Don't mistake that for growth. Don't let their temporary desperation convince you they've changed. This isn't about them. It's about you, recognizing that your worth has never depended on how tightly you can hold on to someone who never truly valued you in the first place. The real shift, the one that matters, happens when you finally see them clearly. You stop romanticizing their crumbs of affection as a feast. You stop believing the narrative that their approval is the prize. And you realize the real prize was never their love. It was your freedom. So stop feeding their validation addiction. Let them face the silence they tried to drown out with their endless games. Let them sit with the emptiness they've been projecting onto everyone else. That's the moment their ego begins to break, not because you set out to destroy them, but because you chose to save yourself. And that choice changes everything. One of the most powerful shifts happens the moment you decide you are no longer available for someone's nonsense. When you stop making excuses for them, stop rationalizing their behavior, and start asking yourself, what do I actually deserve here? For a narcissist, that's the first time they feel their ego wobble, because they've built their entire identity around controlling your reactions. And now you're not reacting the way they expect. At first, it's subtle. Maybe you don't immediately reply to their message like you used to. Maybe you don't drop everything to accommodate them when they demand your time. Instead, you pause, you take a breath, you begin creating space for yourself, and with that space comes clarity. And suddenly they feel it, that shift in energy. They're used to you being pliable, agreeable, easy to manipulate, and they feel like that shift in energy. They're used to you being pliable, agreeable, easy to manipulate, and therefore they feel it, that shift in energy. They're used to you being pliable, agreeable, easy to manipulate, and then you feel it. They've trained you to believe that if you don't keep giving, loving, forgiving, then the connection will break, and that you'll be the one to lose. So they push harder. They test you. They say things like, "You've changed," or "You're being selfish," because they can sense that for the first time, you're stepping out of their control. But the truth is, you have changed. You're no longer willing to bend until you break just to keep the peace. You're no longer willing to abandon your own needs to avoid upsetting them. And it's in this moment, when you calmly but firmly enforce a boundary, that they get their first glimpse of something terrifying to them: your strength. You see, boundaries are not walls. They're not about shutting people out or punishing them. Boundaries are about protecting your peace. They're about saying, I value myself enough to decide what I allow into my life. And for someone who's used to walking all over your kindness, this is earth-shattering. When you say no to their unreasonable demands, they don't just hear the word no. What they hear is, "You don't control me anymore." And that realization cracks their ego because it's built on a fragile illusion that they are in charge, that they can push and pull you like a puppet on strings. At first, they'll try to manipulate their way back in. They might become overly charming, suddenly attentive, pretending to be the person you wished they were all along. Or they'll swing to the other extreme, anger, guilt-tripping, maybe even threats. It's all a test. They're testing to see if they can get you to drop your boundary and return to the familiar dynamic where they hold the power. But here's where you hold steady. This is where you remind yourself that you don't need to explain your boundaries to someone who never respected them in the first place. You don't owe them endless chances to prove they can be better. Because the moment you enforce your boundary, you're also sending a powerful message to yourself. I am enough. I am worthy of respect. I will not shrink myself to fit into someone else's comfort zone. And here's the beautiful paradox. The moment you stop being afraid of losing them is the moment you actually gain yourself. It might not be easy at first. You'll feel the pull of old habits, the urge to appease, to avoid conflict, to smooth things over like you always did. But every time you honor your boundary, you strengthen a new muscle. And every time they realize their tactics no longer work on you, their carefully constructed image of control begins to crumble. This is how a narcissist's ego starts to break. Not because you shouted, not because you fought harder, but because you quietly reclaimed your power. You stopped feeding their need to feel superior. You stopped giving them unlimited access to your time, your energy, your heart. The first time they hit this wall, they'll be stunned. For years, they've believed they could get away with anything because you'd always forgive, always stay, always fight to make it work. But now, you're no longer available for the chaos. You're no longer afraid of their disapproval. And that scares them more than anything else ever could, because deep down, they know this boundary isn't just about them, it's about you finally realizing your worth. And when that realization happens, there's no going back. There's something incredibly powerful about the moment you start to heal without them. Experiences they can have. Because up until now, they've believed that your world revolves around them. They've believed that their presence in your life is what gives it meaning and that without them, you'd be lost, desperate to crawl back. But when you begin to genuinely move forward, when you take those first steps towards your own peace, your own happiness, they feel a crack in the carefully constructed image of themselves as indispensable. You see, a narcissist doesn't just want to be important in your life. They want to be the sun around which your entire emotional universe orbits. They expect you to need their validation, their approval, even their crumbs of attention, and they convince themselves that you could never thrive without them. That's how they justify treating you the way they do, because in their mind, you'll always come back. So imagine the shock they feel when you don't. At first, they don't believe it's real. They might think it's a phase, some dramatic performance to get their attention. And in the past, maybe it was. Maybe you've tried to pull away before and found yourself right back in the same cycle because it felt too painful to fully let go. But this time is different. This time you've stopped performing for them and you've started living for yourself. That difference is subtle, but it's also seismic. When you heal without them, you're no longer waiting for their apology, their closure, or their recognition of the pain they caused you. You're no longer handing over the keys to your happiness and saying, "Here, fix this." Instead, you take the keys back. You start doing the hard, unglamorous work of building yourself up again, piece by piece, day by day. And as you do, you begin to realize something extraordinary. You don't need them. You never did. That realization is catastrophic to a narcissist's ego because it forces them to confront their biggest fear, that they're not essential, that they're not the hero or the savior they imagine themselves to be. Your healing exposes the lie they've been telling themselves for years, that people stay because they can't do better. They notice it in small ways at first. Maybe they see your smile in a photo on social media, and it's not the smile of someone faking it to make them jealous. It's the smile of someone who is genuinely free. Or maybe they hear about you from a mutual friend and learn you've been taking up hobbies, connecting with new people, filling your life with meaning that has nothing to do with them. And though they'd never admit it, something in their stomach twists because it's undeniable proof that their absence didn't destroy you. Here's the irony. They might try to come back the moment they sense you've healed. They might test the waters with a casual text or an attempt to reinsert themselves into your life. Not because they've changed, but because your independence challenges the narrative they've built about themselves. To them, your growth is not inspiring, it's threatening. It shows them they are replaceable. But when you've truly done the work, their return doesn't tempt you the way it used to. You can see it for what it is, an attempt to regain access to your energy, your empathy, your attention, and this time, you're no longer willing to give it. Not out of anger or revenge, but because you've outgrown them. The person they once controlled no longer exists. This is what breaks a narcissist's ego for the first time. Not your anger, not your words, not even your silence. It's your healing. It's the way you rebuild yourself without them, the way you glow in their absence, the way you thrive in a life they're no longer part of. That's when they realize they didn't take you with them when they left. They only took the version of you who thought you needed them. And once they see you standing strong, they'll finally understand the one thing they could never admit to themselves before. They never had the power. They just borrowed it from someone who didn't know how powerful they already were. A narcissist's greatest weapon is your empathy. It's the thing they count on every single time they push your limits. Every cruel word, every dismissive gesture, every time they make you feel like you're not enough, they do it knowing there's a part of you that still cares enough to give them another chance. They've studied you. They know how deeply you feel, and they use that against you. Because as long as you keep feeling sorry for them, they don't have to take responsibility for their behavior. Think about it. How many times have you caught yourself rationalizing their actions? Maybe they're just stressed. Maybe they didn't mean it. Maybe if I love them harder, they'll change. That's not weakness on your part. It's compassion. It's your beautiful, soft heart trying to make sense of why someone you care for is hurting you. So whilst you might feel sorry for them, it's not weakness. It's your beautiful, soft heart trying to make sense of why someone you care for is hurting you. But here's the hard truth. To a narcissist, that compassion isn't a gift they cherish. It's a loophole they exploit. The first time their ego truly starts to fracture is when you stop giving them that access, when you stop rushing in to soothe them after they've caused chaos, when you don't let them rewrite the narrative and turn themselves into the victim while you're left holding the blame. That moment when you go still, calm, and detached, it's foreign to them, and it terrifies them. They'll try everything at first. They'll lash out, accuse you of being cold or heartless. They'll remind you of all the times you've been there for them before, as if loyalty requires you to tolerate their disrespect indefinitely. They'll even try to reel you back in with sweet words and fake accountability. I know I messed up. I'll change this time. But you've heard it all before. You know now that their apologies aren't about remorse. They're about restoring their comfort. You see, the narcissist has built their whole sense of self on their ability to pull you back into their web. As long as they can provoke your emotions, anger, sadness, even hope, they feel powerful. But the moment you step back and refuse to engage, when you don't explain, don't defend, don't rescue them from the consequences of their own actions, they're forced to sit with something they've spent their whole life avoiding, themselves. And that's when it hits them. They realize your empathy was never a weakness. It was a strength they could no longer control. They can no longer use your kindness as a shield against their own reflection. For the first time, they feel the sting of accountability, and their ego doesn't know how to handle it. They thought they'd always have you there to clean up their mess, to make excuses, to believe in the potential they never had any intention of fulfilling. But now you're silent. You're done explaining why they can't keep hurting you. You're done giving them pieces of yourself in exchange for breadcrumbs. It's in this silence that their ego cracks. Because a narcissist can survive your anger. They can even manipulate it to make themselves the victim. But your indifference, your calm refusal to play the game, that's something they can't fight. It forces them to confront the reality they've been hiding from all along. That they're not the center of your universe. That they're not invincible. And that no matter how much they try to dominate others, they're still powerless over their own emptiness. And you finally get to take your power back. Not by screaming or proving your worth to them, but by choosing yourself in a way they never expected you to. Because the truth is, you don't need to punish them. You don't need revenge. The greatest blow to their ego is watching you stand tall, grounded, and completely free of the hold they once had on you. You don't have to save them from themselves anymore. You don't have to save them from themselves and that's exactly what they can't handle. There comes a moment in every narcissist's life when the world stops revolving around them, when for the first time they're forced to look in the mirror and see what's really there. It doesn't happen easily. For so long, they've built walls of charm, manipulation, and blame shifting to avoid the raw, unfiltered truth of who they are. They've become experts at projecting their flaws onto others, convincing themselves that it's everyone else who's broken. But there's something that begins to shatter this illusion, and it usually happens when they can no longer run from the mess they've created. For years, they've told themselves a story, that they're the strong one, the powerful one, the one in control. Every relationship, every interaction was another stage for their performance. They were the hero, the victim, or even the villain, but always the center. They've mastered the art of deflecting blame. When they hurt you, somehow it became your fault. When they lied, it was because you drove them to it. When they pulled away emotionally, it was because you demanded too much. And in the quiet moments when their conscience whispered the truth, they drowned it out with pride. But then something changes. For the first time, someone stops playing along. Maybe it's you. Maybe you stopped covering for them. You stopped rationalizing their behavior or cleaning up the emotional chaos they left behind. Suddenly, they're left to sit in the silence. The kind of silence that isn't filled with another person's forgiveness or empathy. It's just them and the weight of their own action. This moment terrifies them more than anything because it forces them to confront the thing they've spent their entire life avoiding, their own reflection. For someone who's spent so long projecting strength, the reality of their weakness is unbearable. And make no mistake, they are weak, not because they feel pain, but because they've spent their lives avoiding it, running from accountability as if it were a predator chasing them down. When you step away and refuse to engage, they lose the mirror they use to make themselves feel whole. All those accusations they threw at you, calling you needy, insecure, too emotional, were nothing more than the qualities they feared in themselves. The narcissist cannot stand to see the fragility inside them, so they assign it to everyone else. But now, there's no one left to absorb it for them. They might try to pull you back in. They might reach out with the same tactics that worked before, the apologies laced with self-pity, the half-hearted promises to change, or even the anger designed to make you doubt yourself. It's not because they love you, it's because they need you to shield them from themselves. But when you don't respond, when you let them sit in their discomfort and take responsibility for what they've done, something cracks. It's in this crack that a sliver of light shines through. For the first time, they're forced to consider that maybe they're not the hero in their story. Maybe they're not even the victim. Maybe they're the one who's caused the very pain they've been blaming others for. That realization isn't graceful or immediate. It's messy, it's ugly, and it's painful. At first, they'll resist it with everything they have. They'll scramble for distractions, new people to validate them, new situations to make them feel powerful again. But eventually, those distractions lose their magic. One by one, the people in their lives grow tired of the games. The superficial connections don't fill the void, and they're left alone, staring at the version of themselves they've tried so hard to hide. This is the moment where their ego begins to break, not because someone yelled at them, not because someone punished them, but because no one is there to rescue them from their own reflection. And that is the one thing a narcissist cannot tolerate, being forced to face themselves without an audience, without applause, without someone else to blame. You see, there's a power in walking away that goes far beyond revenge or punishment. It's the quiet strength of refusing to carry someone else's emotional baggage. It's the courage to let them wrestle with their own demons while you rise above the chaos. And in doing so, you do the one thing they never thought possible. You show them that their control over you was an illusion all along. It's in this space, when you've stepped back and chosen peace over pain, that they begin to feel the full weight of their choices. For the first time, they see the cracks in their armor. For the first time, they're not admired, adored, or feared. They're just human. And that realization, as simple as it sounds, is what shatters the narcissist's ego like glass. Because the truth is, no matter how much power they pretended to have, it was never real. It only existed because you gave it to them. And the moment you stopped, the moment you chose yourself instead of their chaos, was the moment their empire began to crumble. And the moment you stopped that, the moment you chose yourself instead of their chaos, was the moment their empire began to crumble. And the moment you stopped that, the moment you chose yourself instead of their chaos, was the moment their empire began to crumble. That's when they finally learned the thing they feared the most wasn't losing you, it was losing the illusion that they were untouchable. You know what's terrifying for a narcissist? It's not you being angry at them. It's not you crying or shouting or begging for them to change. It's not even you walking away for a moment in an attempt to make them see your worth. No, the moment that truly shatters their ego The moment that forces them to confront the reality they've been running from is when they realize you're no longer afraid to lose them. For so long, they've conditioned you to believe that their presence in your life is the ultimate prize. They've trained you to measure your value by their approval, to see their affection as a scarce resource you have to fight for. And every time you questioned if you were good enough, every time you stayed in the cycle of highs and lows they created, they felt powerful. They felt in control. Because deep down, they knew you feared what life would look like without them in it. But the day comes when something inside you shifts. Maybe it happens after the 100th lie, or after one too many moments where you've been left feeling small, unseen, and unheard. Maybe it's not even a dramatic event. It could just be a quiet realization that you've been pouring your energy into someone who doesn't even know how to hold it with care. And in that moment, the fear of losing them is replaced by something much more powerful. The fear of losing yourself if you stay. At first, they don't notice the shift. They keep playing their same game, testing your boundaries, dangling crumbs of affection, withdrawing and reappearing when it suits them. They're convinced they can pull you back into their orbit because it's always worked before. But this time, something is different. This time, you don't respond with desperation or pain. You don't rush to fix things. You don't over-explain yourself. And you don't fight to prove your worth. Instead, you step back, you breathe, and for the first time, you realize you don't need them the way you thought you did. That's when their ego begins to crack. Because the illusion they've built, the one where they are the center of your universe, starts to fall apart. They realize they're no longer holding the strings. And what terrifies them isn't just that you might leave, it's that you're strong enough now to walk away and never look back. You see, narcissists survive on the belief that you're too afraid to be without them. That fear is what keeps you coming back, even when they hurt you. Is what keeps you second-guessing yourself, questioning your boundaries, and settling for less than you deserve. But when you step into a place where you know your own worth, when you understand that losing them isn't actually a loss at all, they lose their power. And they feel it. They feel it when you stop texting back within seconds. They feel it when your voice is calm instead of emotional. They feel it when you start making plans that don't include them. When your world stops revolving around theirs. They feel it in the silence they used to manipulate you with, but that now holds no power over you. That's when the panic sets in. Not because they love you, not in the way you deserve to be loved, but because they hate losing the supply they got from your energy, your care, your attention. And yet, they know there's nothing they can say now that would convince you to come back to the version of yourself who believed they were irreplaceable. Because here's the truth. When you're no longer afraid to lose them, it's because you've already won. You've reclaimed the parts of yourself that were buried under their manipulation. You've stopped confusing chaos for passion and inconsistency for love. You've stopped bargaining with someone who never had the capacity to meet you halfway. And the beauty of this moment isn't just in breaking free from them. It's in finding freedom within yourself. Freedom to love without fear. Freedom to choose peace over drama. Freedom to be in relationships where your value is recognized without question. So when they finally realize you're no longer afraid to lose them, when they see you've built a life they can no longer penetrate, their ego crumbles. Because for the first time, they're faced with the truth. You never needed them to complete you. You only ever needed to see your own strength. And now, you do.